Pakistan's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Hina Rabbani Khar. Thank you for being with us here on France 24. Lots to ask you about, in particular, with a lot of the focus now on Pakistan's call for funding in the wake of those floods. But first, I need your reaction to what we're seeing unfolding now. Iran aligning with Russia, NATO backing Ukraine. Are we already in a world war?
I hope not. I mean, I don't think the world, certainly not the planet, can afford a war. It seems we are happily waltzing into one. And that's why countries like Pakistan enrich, I believe, the multilateral fora because of our own experience of conflict in our backyard for decades. And to see that a lot of money, weapons, effort, blood spent eventually has to somehow be dealt with or to be solved or left unsolved on the negotiating table. Therefore, we look at all of this, and our perspective on this has remained consistent, which is that there must be immediate cessation of hostilities so more people don't lose lives, and then get to the negotiating table.
The Russian president, Vladimir Putin, he has directed his ire both towards Ukraine and towards the West. He's made veiled and not so veiled nuclear threats. Pakistan is a nuclear power. Do you have a responsibility to draw red lines when it comes to those nuclear threats?
Absolutely, we do. And we are actually a country which is quite used to other countries, very large countries making nuclear threats. Prime Minister Modi recently made a statement that he had not kept nuclear weapons for Diwali.
So on that score, what's your message to Russia?
Our message to everyone who uses these things callously or the threat of such weapons callously is that responsibility is required for those who own or have a seat on the table. And therefore, I think it is really important. You know what is really being misunderstood in this West versus East is the universality of the values, of the principles that are sometimes not applied in one area. And that complicates stuff.
When you hear Vladimir Putin speak, do you feel as though we've forgotten what you're describing, that language of deterrence?
The language of deterrence, I think I was just listening to the State Department's spokesperson, even only in your program. And I was, he referred to the extensive tools that they have available in their arsenal. So countries big and small must have tools available in their arsenal. And those tools must be based on principles. That is what is perhaps problematic in the world, because there are some countries which have the power to be able to engineer a response and others who don't. We must all go back to the principles of the UN Charter, applicable universally, whether it's in the East or West, Asia or Europe. I tell you, the world might truly become a different place if we start doing that.
Well, we're seeing that there's one issue that concerns the whole planet for sure, and that is global warming. Your country is downstream from what I guess you could call Eurasia's water tower, the Himalayas, and we saw with those record floods.
Sure.
This call made by the Prime Minister this Wednesday in an interview with the Financial Times for mega funds. I know that the French president has offered to host a donor conference here next month. Have you got more specifics from your French counterparts on this?
I think we do. We don't have the specific, but we have more specifics. And I think God is in some ways sending a sign through a country like Pakistan to everyone. We might be fighting wars, but the planet is what we need to be fighting for right now. And the fight for planet requires for us to build the arsenal for having enough tools in the mitigation, in the adaptation sort of, areas to be able to deal with the crisis, which is in some ways of our own making. But now, even if we were to put all our energies together, we may fall short of being able to deal with the crisis. Now, coming to Pakistan, as you know, within a period of few months, we saw forest fires, which were unprecedented in Pakistan's history, extreme drought conditions, which we've had before. And in the same area that we had drought conditions, now we had these, what could be called extreme flooding, which was, frankly speaking, not Riverian flooding even. It was literally flooding which was happening because of climate change, because of 3 degrees higher temperatures. And when something like that happens and there is not the diplomacy that has worked and created an architecture of climate change, so what do? I think it's a sign where everybody must coalesce their energies, their resources, and come together to a country like this, especially when we come to the difficult part of rebuilding and reconstruction.
And for that rebuilding, the Prime Minister calling for mega funds. What does he mean specifically? How much? How? Where?
Look, if you look at the replacement cost of the damage that has been done to infrastructure, which includes roads, schools, colleges, everything, housing, you're probably looking at a number which is very large, about $30 billion or so. But what do you want to do? You don't want to just build back in a poor manner or in a dirty manner. You want to build back in a manner which has adaptation and resilience built into it. We know enough of that exists in our arsenal, so to speak, as to how to do it. But we need resources to be able to do it. Now, Pakistan being a country which has not contributed, is the right word, to the climate crisis. We are not even 0.8%, about 0.8% is our carbon footprint. Do we deserve to fight this alone when this is a mess that is not of our own making? And especially when this is actually hurting the people who are least deserving of it, because this is the poorest of the poor. So in Pakistan, I believe this is not a Pakistan moment, it's a climate change moment. It's a climate crisis moment.
Have the French told you what date would be set for this?
So we are hoping for somewhere because people cannot wait for 3 months to start rebuilding their homes, right? So we're hoping for somewhere around the end of November, early December at best, but we are asking for end of November.
We've been talking about these great power sort of confrontations on the war in Ukraine, on the climate change that's directly affecting Pakistan. Right now, there's a very important Chinese Communist Party Congress taking place, and China's role is coming under the spotlight, and that it's been a kind of debt diplomacy, say some. You're a country that owes money to China. Your thoughts on how you borrow and how you deal with China going forward?
Okay, so this is very interesting because when you talk about a region, it really is very telling that the region that country comes from, barring India, all of China's neighbors have a pretty good view about China's role for regional peace and stability. But outside of the region, countries have a very difficult view, which we come across every day. We don't look at this as debt diplomacy at all. We look at it as infrastructure diplomacy, at building room for convergence diplomacy. Because when you create infrastructure which links a certain country, north-south corridor, build that corridor then gives you nodes to be interconnected within the region. So we look at it as regional connectivity, not as debt diplomacy at all. And to be honest,
despite the white elephant projects and that we've seen in places like Sri Lanka and the fact that you have...
I can only speak for my country, and when I speak for my country, I can tell you that all of this infrastructure that China has contributed towards in terms of assisting Pakistan with financial, not assistance, but financial, sort of models to come up with, are ones which we dearly needed. And what is interesting to note is that we had already gone to the World Bank and to the Asian Development Bank and to the US and to the UK and to the EU saying that these are infrastructure projects that Pakistan would like to be funded if you have the financial resources to lend us the money to do so. So this is not something which is China specific. This is certainly Pakistan specific when I look at it in the broader scheme of things. And this is on Pakistan's demand rather than on China's supply. An important point to perhaps be noted.
Hina Rabbani Khar, your thoughts on Xi Jinping's message at this Congress, which is a more assertive China, and that means both domestically and on the world stage. Domestically, of course, the world's been paying a lot more attention to the crackdown on the Uyghur Muslim minority. Your thoughts on... You mentioned common values, universal values. Do we have universal values when it comes to these issues?
I think we do have universal values. What differentiates us is in the choices that we make in how to conduct diplomacy. For instance, in the East, I can at least speak for my own country. We conduct our diplomacy behind closed doors, whether it's with the East or with the West. We conduct thorough diplomacy, but behind closed doors. We don't like to, raise fingers at people and tell them what they've done wrong in open media. So that's that. As far as the assertiveness of China is concerned, I believe every country is becoming much more confrontational and assertive. This is not only China. And I believe a lot of this has to do with the threat perception and the fear that has been built in by populist leaders all over the world. This is not certainly not helping the world deal with the crises which are actually real, which are actually existential, such as the climate crisis, such as the food security crisis, such as the financial crisis. So we are happily now, creating new crises which require money to be spent on arsenal building, on military building, rather than on dealing with the crises which are at our door, which are pretty much have the capacity to knock us all off the face of the planet. But we seem to think that we have bigger, better problems at hand, which is confrontation and more confrontation.
Hina Rabbani Khar, many thanks for joining us here on France 24.
Pleasure.
We have much more news coming up, and plus the day's